All right. One of my favorite and really just basic holds in this position is a cross-face crush, I call it. And this works well into your twisting neck lock setup because it does end up turning the head, which is the fundamental element to getting those neck locks to work, is getting that chin touching the shoulders, whichever it may be. But this, especially if you're a jiu-jitsu athlete and you want to compete in jiu-jitsu rule sets, this can be altered as well into a choke. But it's the way I first learned this was as a crossface that crushes in between my arm, and his head. In this case, as a crossface crush, I'm going to grab the top of or I'm going to reach and get my bone of my forearm, this blade, I'm going to go bone to bone, just like Billy always says, and Gotch, and get across that jawline. Now I'm going to lock in on my tricep, and I'm going to drop my weight through my opponent. So this one is easiest done when you've got this arm wrap ride. And what you'll do is you'll just reach up, draw, and I like to draw back and find the right spot. Because there is a right spot. If I'm here, he ain't tapping. I gotta be right in that right point.
Fuck that. Oh my God.
Now, if you don't get a tap out of this, that's absolutely fine. And it doesn't really, I mean, ideally you get them to quit, great. If they don't, no loss. You go here, what would you do, Chris? Right, he starts moving his hands up, right? Then maybe he ends up in this. Or he's fighting and panicking and thinking, oh shit, I can't hold their waist. I gotta stop this. Now their arm's in front. Now that ability for them to bridge and roll is reduced. You're creating a response and you're getting them to think more about what's being done to them instead of what they need to do to escape. Always a benefit. Plus, if you're here and you're just hanging tight and you don't get the tap, so what? So what? So what? Just ride, hang tight, regather, whatever, go back to it. Just keep attacking it. You can do it on the other side. Same idea. Turn, crossface, bone to bone. Something, if you are into catch wrestling, you're going to hear a lot. And it's because it's been one of the mantras expressed by Carl Gotch and Billy Robinson, two of the most prominent and important people for modern day catch wrestling, who have taken this art to help create shoot wrestling and pro wrestling in Japan with New Japan Pro Wrestling, and then eventually the UWF offshoots, which would then also become the modern, some of the most important modern equivalents of what would become MMA today. So, bone to bone. I'm going to go bone to bone, and then I'm going to lock onto my tricep as deep and as far down as I can. Once I've done that, I rotate my weight into, it's not me using my shoulders and tricep. I'm not trying to use a ton of muscle. And the muscle is actually to lock into place. Once it's locked into place, then it's about using my body weight to get the finish. And honestly, anytime you can use body weight, it's free. It's free power, free energy. You know, all those cheeseburgers that you've been eating have now come to fruition, and now you can go out and say you were making the right choice the whole time.
I like that.
But like I said, if you're competing in a specifically jiu-jitsu environment and where they would frown upon attacking the face, what you can do is slide under the chin. And for the under the chin lock, or for the under the chin choke, I prefer mainly to come this way, come under, and then get to, again, that same position.
So bad.
And again,
oh my God,
I need to drop my weight forward. And really what you want to think about is trying to get here and shave his head right off of his shoulders. That's where this is going to work. You can push straight down, and often you can get the finish that you need from there. But the most powerful way you can do this, and I say shave, not cut, because it's just like you're shaving, right? You're shaving. I want you to shave his head completely from his shoulders. And that means your elbow, it's not just your hand, but your elbow will continue to shave and trace all the way to the floor. The only thing that stops you from continuing to shave and put the forearm bone into the floor is that he gets in the way. That's it. So everything else that you have is still driving and following in that direction. That means your elbow. We're here, we're riding. I'll go under that. And I might even work my fingers even deeper, 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 deeper. And I'm gonna drop that elbow. So I'm working my fingers, working my fingers, working my fingers. Sorry. Windpipe stuff sucks.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna work my fingers even deeper, deeper, deeper. If you're wearing a gi, you can walk your fingers and get your grip here. The most amount of power you're gonna be able to develop is gonna be through the shoulder and towards the elbow. So if you get into a situation, he's hand fighting you up here with that hand, just lock and see if you can drop your elbow and maybe get that choke. No, maybe keep fighting, and then try it again. This is gonna be the most powerful, the most power you can exert is gonna be through this element here. But what will determine how much of a choke you get, how deep this hand gets on the arm. Because this determines where that starts. This is where the fulcrum starts. So when you start driving, whether it cuts through or whether it just irritates. So make sure that if you really want to finish this, or even the cross-face crush, you get this support grip as deep as you can. If his head is this way, you can still find that choke. Come under. You might even, depending, be able to grab here, pull your elbow back and get under. It really depends on how flexible you are and the shape of you and your opponents. Me as a big guy, I have a hard time trying to come here and draw my elbow to my chest and get under the chin. For me, it's much easier to start at the outside or the inside here position on the chin and go to the outside and start working to get him chilled. And even here, my arm, again, has to be super tight across the neck. Now I can put a little pinch between the two of them. A very common submission from this position is the straight arm lock using your legs. And also, keep in mind as you're watching this, you'll see me often laying on my butt, sitting on my butt here. That's because I'm being nice to my uke. I'm not trying to crush the ever-living hell out of them with everything I do all the time. I'm trying to be polite. But when you're using these moves in the Kesa ride, and even when you're training, you should be training with your butt off the floor. Oh, sorry. The straight arm lock, very simple. Everyone's seen it. Boom, boom.
Please careful.
Here's why it works. One, the arm is straightened out. And what you're doing is you're using your leg, your thigh, as a fulcrum, right? And now you've got this negative space in between which you can drive and attack that arm, creating a break at some point. So basically, it's a scissoring, a shearing motion. You've got pressure going up as pressure is going down. And between the two, cuts that arm off, ideally, at the elbow. This doesn't seem like anything special at all. I get it. Everybody's seen this. Here's how to actually make it good. For one, as you put anybody's arm lock into position, you want to push down on it and create that shearing motion and get that break. But of course, they're going to fumble around and rotate, and they don't want to allow that to happen. Just as much you go to armbar somebody, they turn the thumb and out they go. Well, here's my key to this. One, I'm in my ride, my head's up, I'm locked on the leg, on my thigh, and I usually do this from an arm position wrapped across my waist. I reach back and I get a hold of the wrist and the hand. 2 fingers on the wrist, 2 fingers on the hand. Boom. And I'm using my thumb. Now, Chris is strong, so if I just try to put it in position, I will not be able to do that. I am not strong enough to force Chris's arm there. What I will do, though, is if his arm is across my hip, I will trap it against my own thigh. Rotate your arm. Yeah, I'm using my pressure pushing down my triceps, my shoulders, my chest, and lats, and I'm using my weight, too. I'm sitting everything into this leg. Now, if I move my leg, his arm travels down it. This is how I keep this arm lock tight. I get here and I just dip my leg so that it travels down that angle. And then I actually keep the wrist and capture it here. So, not trying to grab his hand and put it in. I'm keeping it here and I'm guiding it into position using my leg as like a ramp of sorts. And I'm keeping constant contact between his wrist and my leg the entire length of the way. Because at any point, I don't want him to rotate his thumb or, rotate it up. I don't want him to escape this position. I want to keep his arm locked in place so that when it's time for me to apply my hold, not only has it been controlled the entire way with the thumb position exactly where I need it to be, but also through that whole transition, I've been lengthening his arm. The shorter his arm is, the stronger it is. The longer it is, the weaker it is. So I'm here, I'm lengthening that arm, and then I just trap it with my knee on top of my own hand and his wrist. The other thing about this lock, I think that people forget, especially girls, when I teach a hold, I want to teach it so that somebody with hypermobility can make it work. A lot of women are hypermobile. They're smaller. There's going to be less gap between here and here. And I've seen plenty of times where women are stamping that knee down and they're not getting it because, simply put, there's not enough negative space to create the shearing motion. And a lot of women have more hypermobile joints than men. It's more common. It's not always the case, but generally my thing is if I can teach women to apply the submission and get the finish, then it'll work on pretty much anyone. And I had an old training partner who has a double jointed elbow, and I could submit him with these straight arm locks because I gave myself enough space to push the arm through. Maybe there's some weird Russian out there, circus performer that you couldn't do this to, and in that case I'd say choke him. But I've got this thigh up. I've ran it down that leg. Okay, lift. To give yourself that extra space, lift this thigh. And the other thing is I have an advantage because I've got really big legs. His elbow is basically right at the edge. But for a lot of you, what you'll have to do is slide this leg closer to the elbow. Now, it might not be possible for you to really keep your grip on the leg, but I would say that it's okay to allow that grip to be broken because you have this wrist. And if he tries to shrimp, he's being impinged between my leg and my hand. So it's going to make it really difficult for them to get that elbow past your leg, which is the key for them to shrimping and escaping out the back. So you get it to here, you've got it trapped, slide your leg to where it needs to be. Yeah. And now I'm just pushing down and pushing up, pushing up, pushing down, pushing down, pushing up, pushing down, pushing up. And allowing my hand to stay here to keep his hand to keep it from rotating. So I keep that elbow position exactly where I want it. And I'm helping it with my leg. It's very simple, very easy. When you're training this, it should really be done that nice and that easy. It should lock in just so. One thing you may come across, you might get someone here, you're not quite getting what you want. Take the knuckle of your middle finger and find the biceps tendon.
It was more like my chest, but it was something terrible.
Or even if he rotates his arm back like this, which will happen at times. You put this thing in here and he rotates and you've got it trapped. Now, trap the leg, take the knuckle, and just start driving. You can use this knuckle here. Or you can use the back of your fist.
Sorry, my bad, gesture.
You're aiming for, there's a tendon, and the biceps tendon runs up, and it inserts, see, even just me pushing on it, it inserts in the joint here where the scap and the collarbone and everything come together. And it ties into the chest. A lot of people that straight bar bench press a lot get really stiff in the shoulders, but it also often creates, depending on where their arm position is when they're doing this, like if they're very straight, it creates a lot of friction against that biceps tendon. It gets really irritated. See, all I'm doing is...
Okay.
You all right, buddy?
I'm good.
I think you need some work.
I'm good. I just yelled. This is it. I'm getting worked on.
But you can get here and you can attack that and see if you can't get the finish there. I mean, either way, you're gonna be putting pain on this person, and you're gonna get them to react. And reaction, of course, is part of the game. And if you wanted to, you could go start lifting up on the head and hang tight here, take some of their breath away, get back to it, and then get back to that arm. Yeah. One option, depending on how flexible they are, is if they rotate, is you might be able to sit through. You see how this leg is really picking up this shoulder. And then push down here. But I don't find that I get a lot of success with this most of the time because people just are flexible enough that it doesn't create the impingement. I think you'd have a hard time doing this if you were a woman wrestling another woman. So it's something you could work on, and what you're really trying to do is create a different angle of attack. But I like the ride so much that I really feel uncomfortable with me transitioning here to the point that I even start putting my arm back. To me, it's not ideal. But it's a possibility, and maybe you're the person that can make that highly successful. So, giving you some ideas out there. Straight arm lock, trap it, drop the leg, capture the top of your knee, or the bottom of the side and bottom underside of your knee on top of your own hand. Pick up your bottom leg, make sure that it is close to the elbow, down, and up. If his hand is in this position, you're doing the ride here, you're doing the ride here. Try to trap it and rotate it. Again, I want to use this driving and pushing where I can engage my whole core, my body, and use some of my body weight. I don't want to be here trying to do it with just my hands alone. Probably will not be enough for you to be able to do that. We're here. I'm pushing it down. And I'm rotating it so that elbow joint, the inside, is facing up to the sky. And again, finishes the same. Straight arm lock with the legs. So I remember the name of the athlete that uses this hold all the time to get their wins, and her name's Ayaka Miura, and she fights in one. And it's pretty awesome to see her get the head and arm, the Kesa, and then this hold, which I call the top wrist lock with the legs. I've also heard it called V1 with the legs. I think on Tapology, they call it a scarf hold Americana. All things are all apt descriptions. So in this case, where we generally end up getting this hold is A, if their arm is up here tight to their head, and you've got this bend. The other way we'll see it is you're going for your straight arm lock, and they are able to rotate towards their head and will follow that pressure into the leg. I'm sure many of you have seen this hold before. It's a very common hold, and you can do it from side control if you wanted to as well. But I think a real key to making this more successful is this. One, I'm not going to try and move his arm to my leg. Chris is tight enough that for me to do that is already putting the submission on. And by the way, that's completely legit. If it's possible, I would just simply put my hand on the top of the longest lever I could get and just drive down until I got my finish. Most people, that's not going to be the case, but you never know until you get on the mat with them. The easiest way to secure this hand is to literally move your leg up as high as it can to capture the wrist, right? So the closer his arm is to his head, the more flexible he is. The easier it is to put it and then capture it behind the crook of your knee. Now, when you do so, after you've got it...
Oh my God. I'm just trying to bridge because I just don't want to like tap out immediately because I am really tight, yeah.
I'm going to figure 4 my legs to trap this thing. And what I'm doing here is I've got the wrist trapped here down at the bottom, and I have my hips up at the elbow. So if you think of the top wrist lock, Americana, key lock, whatever, you're pushing his wrist down as you're elevating the elbow, as you're sweeping the whole arm down towards his belly button or hip. So in this case, I'll jam the hand up and tight, especially if I'm up here, right? Say I'm hitting, so his hands are up and protecting. Or maybe you were harassing the face, right? And his hand came up to push you off. Capture it. It's easy to stuff this behind the knee now. Now, once I'm here, it's not just thrust into his arm and try to break it here, because it's most people that's not going to be sufficient. What I want to do is sweep this wrist closer to his body, and I'll do that using my legs. But as I do so, one thing I want to make sure is, so if I keep doing this, Chris's natural reaction is going to be to follow his own hand. Okay, the closer this is together, one, now he's got his hands locked so he can prevent this from being separated, let go. This isn't impinging his shoulder. Watch this though, just a little bit. Already starting to create pressure. No. So I want to separate his head from his hand. And one of the ways I'm going to help myself with that is, well, I have his head with my ride.
No.
I S-grip, bone to bone loop. I'm going to pull his head away from his own hand as I'm bringing his hand back towards his legs. You all right there, buddy?
Yeah, this one's serious business.
I'm just bringing it back to his arm. I'm keeping this arm in this position, and I'm bringing it down to his body as I'm pulling his head away. Now, Chris isn't super flexible in the shoulders, so this is killing him. But someone that is more flexible, I might be down here, and I'm sweeping this arm back as far as I can get it, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drive my hips in. And what that's going to do is push his wrist under his elbow. And that's going to cause this son of a gun practically to explode. I also colloquially call this the exploder arm lock, because I've seen people hit it in competition and they get in there and it happens so fast. Boom, their hips engage and someone's going pop, 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 screaming and rolling around on the mat, and their arms got to get taped up. So do not be a spaz on your training partners with this. You will explode their elbows. There's really nowhere for it to go. And there's hardly a tighter hold out there. But if your ride is correct and you've got the hold tight, you won't need to. You can do it with control. So we're going to bring that back, and we want to make sure that we pull his head away. If we allow his head to stay here, I'm not going to get that submission, and he might start to rotate and turn out. I don't want that to happen. Let's say I'm going for my straight arm lock, and he rotates his thumb towards his head. Good. Now I'm going to drive it down. Capture it. If you don't want to figure 4, you could just pinch here, knee to knee, and you'll get the same effect. As need be, you might even want to push and pull. Little things you can add, but I really feel as if you have this tight and you've got this head lifted and elevated, It's now just a matter of working your hips back and then thrusting your hips through. Because as you work the hips back, you bring the arm closer to his hip, closer to his belly button, pointing his elbow even higher in the sky, and then it's just a matter of hip drive. If you watch Ayaka Miura's fights, she'll get here, she stuffs this thing in, locks it up, pulls it down, and hips through. Bang. And gets that finish. It'll look a lot more dramatic than this, I imagine, because being women, they're more flexible. So it's going to take more leverage and more movement to reduce and to increase the impingement in a more mobile partner's arms. So depending on how flexible your partner is, will determine how much you're going to need to use this. You big muscular heavyweights, probably not as much, but here's an example. Gordon is quite flexible. So if you were to try and lock this in on him, you would probably need to take his arm quite a ways back before he would even consider tapping out. And that's because even though he's a heavyweight guy, he's more flexible than your usual run-of-the-mill heavyweight. So mileage may vary in terms of what you may need to do to create that impingement. But the most important parts are work harder or work smarter, not harder. So when you want to go for this hold, if you've got him here and you're driving forward, pressing with short arms tight to your body, bring the leg up to capture it. Help yourself out. Or if you're coming from here and they rotate towards the head, keep that position. Capture it with the leg. Help yourself. And once you've got it, trap, and then try to steer his body away from it. Remember, we're still in a ride. I need this ride to stay solid and capable to get this submission. So there's no way I'm sweeping this thing back. My ride's falling all to shit. Control this head nice and tight. If you need to, you can bring this knee up under the elbow. And now I'm coming above and below. So if as far as I can get Chris is here, I can start pulling with this bottom leg and pushing with this top one. But you're going to find a lot more success, I think, by using your whole body to sweep it all down and away from his head. And then finish just what you need at the end. Well, keeping control of the head. All right, I'm going to show you a shoot version of something you may have seen if you ever watched the WWE or New Japan Pro Wrestling, and it's called the Anaconda Vice. Made famous in the more modern sphere of understanding from CM Punk and Hiroyoshi Tenzan. I remember seeing it from Yorinaga Nakamura in the Shudo flows way back in the day, in the early 90s. As well as seeing Tenzan use it when I was over in New Japan Pro Wrestling. It's essentially a telephone arm lock and a headlock diaphragm crush at the same time. So the way you would find yourself into this is you want this arm up close and across the head. So I might do my hip shift to get it over. Or let's say I'm attacking a straight arm lock and he rotates up towards his head, or anything of that nature. Or if I scoop in my back pocket, put the elbow across and I'm riding here and I'm putting pressure on him and he's starting to fight, I'll attack this arm. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to feed it to my bottom arm. And I actually want to feed it into a thumbless grip. You can do it with a thumb and that's okay too, but I prefer a thumbless grip. I feel like I get more power, and I'm also trying to feed his hand into the bottom side of my palm, right aligning with my knuckles. Here. When I rotate, when I reverse motorcycle, I really get a good twist in the radius and the ulna leading into his elbow. Once I've passed this hand through, and I want to be down low, the longest part of the arm, the furthest down I can get so I can get the longest lever possible. I'm going to reach through and wrap my hands together just like a top wrist lock. Americana, key lock, however you want to refer to it. So I'm doing this. You all right, Chris?
I'm fine.
I'm just laying on him. I'm not even hips up, and he's just dying.
It's fucking heavy.
I'm rolling these hips, these wrists together and in and making them strong. Because I do not want Chris to be able to straighten his arm out. Okay. I want to make it so that it's as tough as possible for him to do that. So I'm here, I feed it down to my hand. Now, as soon as I'm here, I got to rotate these wrists. And then I'm going to lift and I'm going to pick up my outside elbow, my top elbow, as I'm rolling and pushing out with my bottom hand, which will put impingement on the elbow, on the shoulder, while I'm also crushing him. So it's a bit like the telephone arm lock, pulling it away from the head. His elbow will be high here, and I'm doing this sort of thing. And while I'm doing that, though, I have his head in position, so I'm lifting him at the same time. Here, rotate. Rotate. And in this case, I might even sit up and try to drive away to get more drive on that bottom wrist. Feed. If you have thumbs, that'll work too. That's fine. The main thing is pull these in tight and drive, twist your wrists down and away. And at the same time, sink that weight through your opponent. One last time. We're here. Feed it to your hand. Once you've got it, roll through. And notice, I'm not down here. I'm as close to my grip as I can get because I want to deliver all my power in one point. If I just pick his head up, maybe I can get the diaphragm crush because you're still in that head and arm position. But specifically with the Anaconda Vice, you're going to rotate that elbow in tight and that wrist away from his head. Ladies might be flexible enough that you're not quite getting the impingement on the elbow that you want, but you still have that diaphragm crush. So it's a multi-part submission. Anaconda Vice.